All right, welcome to week 10, and this week we are looking at chapter 10, which is historical research. I would say that along with the previous chapter, I'm probably most comfortable from a methodological perspective with this material. Um, Obviously, the previous week, my master's thesis dealt with terrorism, which is an often, it's a subject that's often dealt with from a comparative perspective. This week, doing historical research, I'm trained as a political theorist, and that means, I'm interested in sort of the history of ideas. This is something that I think makes a lot of sense to me. It's a lot easier for me to follow a lot of this stuff. To me, one of the most important things that happens, and I discussed this in previous classes as well. Um, I think that political science and history have a close relationship, probably closer to the other social sciences than any others other than sociology. I think sociology and political science are very close in terms of what they're studying and why they're studying. Political scientists, I think, are more interested a little bit in power than sociologists are, although I think sociologists clearly spend a lot of time dealing with power. The I had a quote from an American political scientist from the early 20th century in my Politics Matters syllabus that said, history without politics, well, wait a minute, politics without history has no root. Uh, Politics without history, or history without politics, grows no fruit. I think that, I butchered that, but I think that captures sort of the importance of the relationship between the two, and especially this notion of temporality. I really like that idea, the notion that we need to we need to respect first and foremost the sequence of ideas, and that human beings are for better or worse immersed in circumstances. The attitudes that were pervasive in 1900 are not the attitudes that are pervasive in 2021. I think there was an interesting, I've seen a couple of different discussions, for example, of The Great Gatsby, where there's a scene in the movie where this guy's basically talking about, replacement theory, which was a fairly common racist trope in the early part of the 20th century. Basically, the white man's burden, all that kind of stuff. It was hard not to think that way when you are a white male living in 1920. That was sort of the attitude that whites were superior. I think that we need to understand history, and we need to understand historical context. And I think understanding timing and sequence is very important, especially in understanding politics. For example, again, my master's thesis is terrorism. And Americans tend to focus, when they think about terrorism, on sort of Islamic radicalism. But in fact, if you know your history about terrorism, you know that in fact, again, at the turn of the century, it was anarchists who were the most prone to violence, and sort of the archetype of the anarchist was, a bomb thrower. People throwing bombs in crowded, theater, crowded gatherings and things like that, and assassinations. There were close to a dozen assassinations of high-ranking. Of course, McKinley was assassinated by an anarchist. Roosevelt, there was an attempted assassination of Teddy Roosevelt by an anarchist. Sadi Carnot, I want to say he was French, was assassinated by an anarchist. One of the kings of the Balkan, kingdoms was killed by an anarchist. That idea of the revolution of the revolution of the deed, or propaganda of the deed, was very prevalent in that period of time. And so, what changed? Well, our presence in the Middle East changed, really beginning with the Iranian Revolution. I think we need to look at that's at the sequence of events, and to understand the Iranian Revolution happens, and we began upping our military presence because we no longer have Iran as an ally. We have to have a heightened military presence. Well, our heightened military presence leads to a heightened cultural presence, and that leads to the kind of culture clashes that, that produce political unrest and conflict. And I think to some extent that is an important, something that we need to understand in terms of how we approach terrorism. And so anyway, this week we have, I want to say, just the 2 assignments. And so I hope that we all have a great week and learn a lot.